From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. With the beginning of February, the 111th Tennessee General Assembly will enter its fourth week of its second session. Already, we've seen new bills filed, old bills passed, other bills debated. We've also seen old and new controversies begin. To give his thoughts about the session so far and what lies ahead as Governor Bill Lee prepares to give his annual State of the State address on Monday, we have the House Speaker, Cameron Sexton, to be with us. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you.
Let's start out right away with an area that may be the biggest disagreement so far that you've had with the administration. Both you and the Lieutenant Governor expressed concern about Governor Lee's decision in December to go ahead and accept refugees to continue to come into the state. You wanted him both to push the pause button on it. There's now a bill that I believe you're a co-sponsor on, and over 50 members of the House, a majority, want to do this to say we want the legislature to be able to approve that before the governor's yes goes to the federal government. Is that right?
That's correct. It's filed, and that's Representative Ron Gantt's bill. And basically what it does is also protect us physically as we go forward through this and trying to determine what those costs are that would affect the state and locals as well. And that's one part of why he filed that bill. Now,
the governor says that going through the federal government on this is the best way to do it, because when the refugees come, you have a better idea of when they get here and what they're doing. And they're screened pretty well. I think with the Trump administration now, they're screened even more than ever. So why take a second look at what the governor wants to do?
Well, we have a duty as a General Assembly, appropriations duty, that money's going to be dispensed out, and so we need to make sure that we understand what that looks like and how much that is and how many people are coming and who they are and where they are. There's still a lot of information that we don't have, because when they come into America, they get a Social Security card, which allows them to get into the system, and it's very hard to differentiate how many we have.
Is this part of the ongoing thing? The legislature has had its own lawsuit being paid for by private firms on pro bono basis by a group who's been trying to get Tennessee out of the refugee system for a long time. You've never prevailed in the courts. Is this sort of a continuation of this? Is another sign you're going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, the court case is totally different. This is, we have a job as the General Assembly to protect Tennesseans first and foremost. So even though the vetting process is there, we still have concerns. But also, when they come in, if they're getting state resources and state dollars, that's an appropriation. That's an allotment of money that we like to be able to have to say on.
But protect Tennesseans from what? Most these refugees have a very low rate of having any crime once they come into the country. It appears a number of your members are talking about somehow they're protecting them because a lot of bad people are coming in.
Well, there could be. I mean, you look at the vetting process.
You think the vetting process by the Trump administration is not strong enough?
Well, it's a lot better than the Obama administration. We'll admit that first and foremost.
But not enough?
We don't know. We're not involved in it. We have to take them at their word. But what I will say is when you look at the European countries and how they were using the legal system to come into a country for people who wanted to do harm, we want to be a little bit more cautious as we go through that.
Another program that's in the news is the effort that began the legislature last year, along with the governor wanting to do it, to take the 10 Care program for health care being provided primarily to working families, take it on a block grant basis. The Trump administration is talking about pushing that again with an announcement about it just in the last couple of days. But the problem is apparently what they're talking about wanting to do and what the state is asking for. The state's asking for a much broader change than what the federal government wants to do. So you're first in line. You're the only state applying for it so far. Mm-hmm. But is this when you want to be first in line? I mean, don't you want to have work it out a little bit more? It looks like you got some more negotiations.
Well, I mean, if you are able to design your program and have the flexibility that you need, it doesn't matter if you go first. The only time you don't really want to go first is when the federal government is telling you how great something is and you don't have the ability to control it or have the flexibility in it. So in this case, I don't think it hurts us to go first.
So you think that, are you like the governor in thinking you're going to get this approved by sometime later this spring or summer?
We could. You know, we've had conversations with the governor this week already, with Lieutenant Governor and myself, and he feels confident that they're at a very good negotiating place with them. And even though the CMS rules that came out was for a different population, they did use a lot of the things in the block grant that was proposed by the state of Tennessee and those guidelines that they sent out.
So you feel good about being first in place, first in line to get this done?
If we can design our own program, then we're first, because you can't compare us to the other 49 states.
Well, another challenge the state faces right now is that the person who's been in charge of 10 Care for the last couple of years and who's been leading your negotiations is leaving state government to go into the private sector. Mm-hmm. The timing for that's not very good. Are you confident you have some other people who can step in and take his place and finish those negotiations?
Well, I mean, that's up to the governor, but we weren't negotiating with a team of one. There was a team that Gabe Roberts took with him, so I'm sure there's ample people there who can step in and fill that role.
already in the legislature, we've seen some continuing pushback about the voucher program that was approved for school on a pilot basis in Memphis and Nashville last year. You voted against it. There are members in one of your committees that were very upset about it, saying they pulled every dirty trick in the book to pass it in the House. It passed by 1 vote. I've heard you've been quoted as saying that you're not planning to necessarily make a big push to try to get that bill, that program repealed. In fact, I've heard you said that the idea of doing that is dead on arrival. Why?
Well, I never used the words dead on arrival. I think that was a summation of someone based on the points. What I said is we've never really gone back and undone something that was passed by a constitutional majority, whether or not you agreed with it or not. And so in order for you to repeal this law, you would have to pass it in the House, pass it in the Senate, which in itself is tough, and not have the governor veto it, which is a tall mountain to climb.
Well, you may have that same problem with what you're trying to do with refugees. Do you feel like it only takes a majority in either house to override a veto? So if you've got the votes to pass it, you should be able to override it. But are you going to be able to hold votes on that? Usually governors have a better track record than what you might expect, since it doesn't require a 2/3 override for a veto.
On the refugee resettlement?
On either one of them.
Well, I mean, it depends on when you're in session and when you get it through, and if you can come back and veto it. The things that we've had problems in the past was when we were already adjourned and we left and we weren't able to overcome the veto.
Are you concerned that the governor is pushing this along with the education officials in the first year, a year earlier than what it was originally proposed when it got through? There already been some questions about money being misused and a pilot program being done with especially abled children. The money may be being spent for the wrong things, and also concerns that parents might have to pay income tax on it.
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of questions being answered. Your point was another type of program that was passed years ago that they've uncovered through the comptroller's audit of things that were being done that they're trying to fix. What I will say, as far as the governor's intent, I'm not going to argue with his intent. I know what he's wanting to do and what his belief system is, and he's doing what he believes is best. And our body's going to take a look at it and see what happens on the implementation part.
Do you see the possibility you'll ask the governor through a resolution in the legislature to ask him not to do it, not the education officials not to do that? I mean, we're already pretty far into the approval process for people to go to schools in these private education places. So how do you make that work? I mean, we're getting down to where people need to know where they're going to put their kids next year.
Well, but the rules still haven't been adopted fully. They're still trying to implement the contract that was approved here recently for the vendors and people who would come in to help the process. So they're still in the process of doing all that work. So what I will say is members could file a resolution or a bill to try to delay the implementation. I've had conversations with anybody in the House at this point.
Might you support that?
Well, we'll have to see what it looks like. It's hard to support something when you don't know what it is. You know how laws are. I like to read it a little bit before I make a comment on it.
House Speaker Cameron Sexton is our guest here. We're 4 weeks into the legislature, about to continue his conversation with him about all the things going on up on the Hill after this break.